Well, Mr Bonney, ladies and gentlemen, I should clarify that bit about being elected unopposed last year. There were other parties standing in the election. It was only unopposed once it got to the Parliament, but it was a vigorous democratic campaign with a very satisfactory outcome. But can I say thank you, Mr Bonney, and thank you to the Commonwealth Club of California, which is the oldest and largest public affairs forum in the country. It's an honour to speak here as First Minister of Scotland. Now, Scotland and the United States share many ties of family, friendship, culture, ideas, trade, commerce. Woodrow Wilson, one of 23 United States presidents who could claim Scots or Scots-Irish descent, once remarked that every line of strength in American history is a line coloured with Scottish blood. And from time to time, various surveys have suggested, and I really love this figure, suggests that almost 30 million people in these United States claim Scots or Scots-Irish ancestry, although the official census figure is only around 10 million. And I just love that concept. You know, it means there's 20 million people across the United States who perhaps aren't officially Scottish, but want to be Scottish. What greater compliment has ever been paid to any nation? So as far as we're concerned, with due deference to the official census figures of the United States, we'll settle for the 30 million and more. So I take it there's a huge compliment that so many millions of additional Americans are claiming links with Scotland. They are very, very welcome to do so. And incidentally, I think that number might increase after the launch of the film Brave, which was premiered in Los Angeles last night. It's the most fantastic collaboration between California and Scotland, with Disney Pixar's vision inspired by Scottish myths and landscapes, and been realised with the help of a largely Scottish cast. It is an extraordinary film, and I commend it to you, ladies and gentlemen. You know, find some children to go with as an excuse. It's really quite scary. You know, not for the kids; the adults were the ones who were scared. But it's an amazing film, and does Scotland and proud. And well done to Disney and Pixar. The Scottish influence, of course, in California goes back a long way. The railroads, which did so much to open up the West, were to a huge extent funded by a Scottish investment trust. My wife, who's with me here in San Francisco, is paying homage tomorrow to John Muir from Dundebar, the great and far-sighted environmentalist, by visiting the National Preserve of redwood trees named after him just north of where we are today. In Scotland, to celebrate the anniversary, we're planning a major extension to the John Muir Way. It will be a long-distance footpath starting near Dunbar to mark the centenary of Muir's death in 2014. Now, John Muir had a view, and that was encapsulated in a wonderful quote. John Muir said, "Everybody needs beauty as well as bread." And that's a fine expression, of course, of the need for sustainability. And the concern for the environment, of course, is one of the joint and shared concerns of California and Scotland, together with a passion, of course, for innovation and an internationalist outlook. One of the famous people from thereabouts who was proud of his Scots and Scots-Irish roots, of course, was John Steinbeck, born in Salinas, studied at Stanford, a Californian who was deeply proud of his ancestry. Famously, he used lines from Robert Burns' poem To a Mouse to title his fifth novel Of Mice and Men. But Moussie, thou'rt no thy lane, improving foresight may be vain. The best laid schemes of mice and men aft gang agley, and leave us naught but grief and pain for promised joy. The Commonwealth Club of California was actually the first institution to recognise Steinbeck's talent, awarding a prize to his third novel in 1934. And I've traced a quote from Steinbeck that suggests he was less pleased by this than perhaps he should have been. He said, quote, "This is the first, and God willing, the last prize that I shall ever receive." Well, it wasn't perhaps the greatest forecast from John Steinbeck, because he went on to many, many more, including the Nobel Prize, of course, 3 decades later. In 1964, Steinbeck embarked on a correspondence with the recently widowed Jackie Kennedy. And it was a correspondence which has a fantastic exchange of letters. And in one of the letters, Jackie Kennedy writes to Steinbeck. Of course, she says, Ireland, like Scotland, is a lost cause. And Steinbeck wrote back, "You talked of Scotland as a lost cause. That's not true. Scotland is a cause unwon." So tonight, I want to talk about the unwon cause. A wonderful way of putting it, and what I want to do this evening is to outline why the cause of Scotland, of independence for Scotland, is one which will be won when it's put to the people in a couple of years' time. In doing so, I'll make it clear that independence is the best way, in my estimation, of tackling other unwon causes which all governments must fight and fight continually, creating jobs, opportunities, delivering for the common weal of our people, promoting good international relations abroad. But first, I want to make a straightforward case. Scotland is a nation which has made a substantial contribution to the world and has a huge amount to offer the world in the future. And I think it's fair to say that that fact is increasingly recognised from businesses around the world. If Scotland were an independent nation, substantially due to our oil and gas reserves, we would have the 6th highest per capita gross domestic product in the OECD. That would still be behind the United States of America, you'd be relieved to know, in 4th place. Indeed, California, if you separated out California, would be in 3rd place, but ahead of the United Kingdom, which currently ranks 16th. Even if you discounted oil and gas, Scotland is the 3rd most prosperous part of the United Kingdom after London and the southeast of England. Now, much of that success is based on innovation. Like California, our economy looks to the future. We have 5.2 million people in Scotland, a smaller population than the San Francisco Bay Area, a 7th of the population of California as a whole. Yet, according to the Times Higher Educational Supplement, we have 5 universities in the world's top 200, even more per head of population than California, although I should say that California does have 2 out of the top 3. We also rank first in the world in terms of research productivity per unit of GDP, second in the world in terms of research impact. Eric Schmidt, the chief executive of Google, spoke in Scotland last August, pointing out that he had personally invested in a number of Scottish computer science companies. I quite like that. When somebody says, "I have personally invested in a number of companies," then I sort of sit up and take notice, rather more than you might just of a general good-natured forecast. And what Eric Schmidt said was, quote, "Many people don't know how strong the initiatives are in computer sciences in the Scottish universities. There's every reason to believe there'll be quite a renaissance here." And what Mr. Schmidt had noticed was the quality of work being done in areas such as informatics, optoelectronics, by leading Scottish universities and companies. Our life science research, of course, achieved global fame more than a decade ago now, when the Roslin Institute cloned Dolly the sheep. If you visit the wonderful, and I do think you should, as often and as you possibly can, not just visit Scotland, but when you go as part of the Brave Tour, which we'll be launching shortly, then you should call into the National Museum of Scotland. It's absolutely fantastic. I mean, you've got the array of Scottish inventions. You have the Alexander Fleming's Nobel Prize for discovering penicillin. You've got James Watt's first steam engine. You've got John Logie Baird's first colour television, invented in 1932. And right alongside them, you've got Dolly the sheep. We are ranked number one in the world in terms of the impact of our life science research relative to our GDP. And the researchers, and this is an important point, have an extremely substantial tradition of working collaboratively with industry. You know, when I was a lad growing up in Linlithgow, I sort of stumbled across the fact that Scotland seemed to have invented a great number of things, invented the modern world, according to an American. We like quoting an American writer saying that because we would like to have said it ourselves, but we like quoting the American. It sounds more modest. But when Herman said that Scotland had invented the modern world, he had an area of truth in it. And so when I was a boy growing up in Linlithgow, I found Scotland had invented all these things. Of course, nobody actually told me why we'd invented all these things. You know, was it because we were more inventive than anyone else? And then when I got to think about it later in life, I realised that there was actually two aspects to it. One was the education system, which was superior to anything else, which educated more people. You know, the more people you educate, the more you'll invent. It increases the number of people who are able to invent things. But secondly, and equally importantly, in the 19th century in particular, Scotland had the most advanced capital markets in the world. And if you look at most, not all, but most of the great Scottish inventions, like the steam engine for that matter, or a range of others, then they were invented as part of an industrial process. And therefore, the collaboration of our researchers in life science with industry is part of a long-standing Scottish tradition, which sees innovation as part not just of an academic, but of an industrial process. One of the companies I'll be visiting in my stay tomorrow is LifeScan, a Californian company which employs more than 1,000 people in Scotland already. And many of them are conducting world-leading research in diabetes, one of the great diseases and afflictions of the modern era. So we have key strengths in Scotland in tourism, financial services, food and drink. In fact, one of Scotland's greatest inventions saw its exports increase by no less than 20% last year. Global whisky sales were worth $4.5 billion in 2011. I'm delighted to say, incidentally, the United States of America remains the top Scotch whisky market in the world, which is a tribute to the excellent taste and discretion of the citizens of these United States. But you have to watch out. You know, Brazil, Singapore are catching up. So really what I'm saying to the Commonwealth Club is you must do your duty by drinking your full quota. Because I want the United States to stay in the world's number one. In the energy sector, in which our chairman this evening played a most distinguished role, Aberdeen is the largest centre in the world after Houston. Scotland has the ambition and potential to become the renewable energy powerhouse of the continent of Europe. The Scottish Government is committed to meeting business needs and works together in a coordinated way to support business. And finally, and crucially, we can offer a great quality of life. The vibrant cities close to extraordinary landscapes. Like California, we recognise the importance of a good lifestyle in attracting skilled workers. Unlike California, we can't promise constant sunshine. Although I did some research today and found out that one comparison which might make up for the slight dearth in sunshine is the fact you can get a golf club membership at a quality golf club in Scotland for 10% of the cost in this state of California. So it's not altogether surprising that we hear the news, and this is something of an exclusive since it's hot off the press in the last hour. The Ernst & Young carry out an annual business attractiveness survey, and the 2012 edition has just been released. And I'll read you some of the highlights. I'm tempted to read the whole thing, it's so fantastic. But basically, for the second year running, Scotland has outperformed every other part of the UK in generating employment from foreign direct investment. To quote the Ernst & Young, job creation is the true measure of a successful FDI strategy, and on this count, Scotland is currently winning hands down. What is impressive about the latest survey is it reflects our ambition that an increasing number of FDI and foreign direct investments into Scotland should be in research and development, which has been one of our long-standing aims, and there's evidence in this latest survey today that that is being successful. I suppose, given that the Scottish football team isn't performing at all, actually, at the present moment, but we have great hopes for the future. The fact that we're beating London in foreign direct investment just now gives us some compensation and satisfaction. The Foreign Direct Investment magazine this year ranked Edinburgh and Glasgow as first and second in Europe in its assessment of large cities of the future. And the list of international companies which have invested in Scotland very recently includes such great names as Amazon, Avaloq, Ceridian, Dell, State Street and many others. And of course they join huge Californian companies such as Hewlett-Packard, Oracle, Cisco and Chevron, which have been based in Scotland for a considerable period of time. So one of the messages in this visit is we want more companies to join these successful companies building success in Scotland. So yesterday, the Scottish Development International, the Scottish Government's inward investment arm, launched a marketing campaign to encourage more companies to invest in Scotland. I've written personally to 70 of California's largest companies to highlight how Scotland could benefit their business. That letter will be followed up with direct contact with our SDI team in California and in Glasgow. Now, our aim is to set out the fundamental strengths of the Scottish economy, our good quality of life, and to highlight other key facts. The business operating costs for quality businesses can be some 30% lower than in other parts of the United Kingdom. So the message is clear: Scotland is open for business, and the business of Scotland is business. Perhaps, however, the best example of Scotland's ambition, innovation and internationalism is what I was speaking about with Governor Brown today, is the work on climate change. In 2009, the Scottish Parliament unanimously passed the toughest climate change legislation in the world. We committed ourselves to a 42% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2020, an 80% reduction by 2050. Scotland is committed to producing enough energy from renewable resources by 2020 to meet all of our own electricity demand. The potential is certainly there. We have 10% of Europe's wave power resources, 25% of offshore wind and tidal power resources, which isn't too bad for a country with 1% of the European Union's population. And as an international statement of our ambition in marine energy, we've established the $15 million Saltire Prize, one of the largest commercial challenge prizes in the world, in conjunction with National Geographic, the first time that the world's greatest educational charity has allied itself with a government. We've received some 150 expressions of interest from more than 30 countries, a growing number of declared competitors in that position. We now have a situation where the European Marine Energy Centre, which is based in the Orkney Islands, is the world's only fully accredited test facility for grid-connected wave and tidal converters, where Glasgow is the leading European base for offshore wind research, and where Strathclyde University's Technology and Innovation Centre is a £100 million hub for thousands of researchers and industry to work together in pioneering this technology. In fact, there are now more working wave and tidal devices in the waters around Scotland than in the rest of the world put together. So it's an area of huge interest, investment and potential for the future of Scotland. All 12 of Scotland's universities have formed the Energy Technology Partnership. Earlier this year, we signed a collaboration with Abu Dhabi's prestigious Masdar Energy Institute. I read recently about the origins of California's Silicon Valley. Much of the credit for that extraordinary growth is often given to Frederick Terman. And one of his great contributions as Dean of Engineering at Stanford University was to expand the university's capability in high technology sectors. Looking back on that remarkable growth in his later years, Terman reflected that, quote, when we set out to create a community of technical scholars in Silicon Valley, there wasn't much there, and the rest of the world looked awfully big. Now a lot of the rest of the world is here in Silicon Valley. I'd like something similar to happen in Scotland. When planning for the European Marine Energy Centre started around a decade ago, it was hard to see if it was going to be successful at all. Viewed from the islands of Orkney, off the northern coast of Scotland, the rest of the world doesn't look awfully big. It can look also awfully far away. But at the moment, in that perhaps unlikely sphere, we have now achieved the position I mentioned a few seconds ago, when there are more different types of wave and tidal devices in the waters around the Orkney Islands and Scotland than in the rest of the world combined. The Pentland Firth is now the world's largest commercial-scale marine energy site. An independent report from Scottish Renewables estimated there had been more than £1 billion of investment in the renewable sector in Scotland during the previous year. Professor Ian Bryden of Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen coined the phrase that Scotland's Pentland Firth was the, quote, Saudi Arabia of tidal power, because of the vast potential resource that its currents contain. So I'd say that in terms of technological development, Scotland is becoming the Silicon Valley of marine energy worldwide. And having been at the heart of the marine engineering revolution in the 19th century, at one point making some quarter of the world's shipping, we are now placing ourselves at the heart of the marine engineering revolution of the 21st century. The marine engineering revolution, which is going to engineer and design and develop, install and maintain and service the great machines which are going to power much of the energy needs of the coming century. So, as you have gathered, we would say that there are few parts in the world which have the level of ambition in their plans for renewable energy as Scotland has, but California is one such place. California's renewable energy target of meeting 33% of electricity consumption by 2020 is the most ambitious of any state in the United States. The 80% target for reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 matches Scotland's exactly. Like Scotland, you have a political consensus behind your targets. Actions started by Governor Schwarzenegger are being maintained and built on by Governor Brown. Now, in this situation, of course, Scotland tries to do what it can to promote international consensus, and that's particularly important with the summit in Rio starting tomorrow. And so we thought to ourselves, how could we influence world leaders to be as far-sighted as the present and immediate past Governor of California? And so just after the Copenhagen summit a few years ago, we devised a 2020 whisky. 42% proof, which goes to those countries and those world leaders who are willing to commit themselves to the 42% target by 2020. I'm delighted to tell you that one of the few politicians in the world who now has a bottle of that whisky is Governor Jerry Brown, and I presented it to him this very morning in Sacramento. I know that Angela Merkel is desperate to get her hands on a bottle. But I've made it absolutely clear to Germany that the 40% target is not enough. They have to go all the way to 42% before that bottle of whisky can be theirs. There's a serious, hugely serious point in all of this that Governor Brown and myself were discussing. That a time when international financial storm clouds are not just gathered but burst upon us, and where the recovery seems elusive, and where there are a whole range of areas that are required, and where every single one of us, I suspect, economists, non-economists, human beings as well, find the frustration of not seeing the degree of action and joint concern that is demanded by circumstances. It is the understandable pressure for people to take their eyes off the climate change ball, to say, well, the immediate pressures of a world recession, a financial collapse, the difficulties in rebuilding confidence in financial structures are such that surely the issues of climate change and greenhouse gases somehow seem very distant. But, ladies and gentlemen, they are not distant. They are very immediate, and many places in the world are already feeling their dramatic effects. And therefore, despite everything, it's my view, it's the view of your governor, that we have to set that steady course in terms of having the ambition to tackle a fundamental challenge to the safety and future of this planet, as well as dealing with the immediate international financial crisis. California and Scotland, I think, can contribute a huge amount to the technologies which tackle climate change. And Governor Brown and I have agreed today to set up a working party of officials from our administrations to work on that very point. If you think about the communication revolution of the 20th and 21st century, some of the most important early developments, the telephone, the television, the fax machine, were developed in Scotland. But a massive proportion of the revolutionary recent technologies in programming, internet search, tablet computers, social networking have been developed here on the west coast of America. Now, my belief and hope is that Scotland and California can use that appetite for invention to tackle what may be the most important technological challenge of the 21st century, how we manage that transition to a low-carbon economy. And as developed countries succeed in making these technological breakthroughs, as we shall, in bringing the costs of green energy production into line with market realities, I believe it's important that we recognise our obligation to help the developing world grow in an environmentally sustainable manner. Earlier this month, I launched Scotland's Climate Justice Fund, together with Mary Robinson, the former President of Ireland, and the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. That is a cause which I've taken to as many places as possible, and I know that we find a willing audience here in California. Now, all of these run through Scotland's economic strengths, advantages, highlights, things we do well, things we have done well, our track record of innovation, our contribution to world development, our wish to seek an alliance and friendship with other interested parties, some of the answers to the problems which beset this planet, raises a hugely interesting question. If Scotland is able to try and hopefully to succeed in showing global leadership on one of the most significant environmental, economic and moral issues facing the planet, that of climate change, why on earth shouldn't we have control of our own taxes, welfare system and foreign policy? I noticed that Paul Krugman, when he spoke to this club last month, was scathing about the European response or lack of response to promoting economic recovery. Here in Scotland, we are seriously affected by the excessive austerity of the UK government's tax and spending policies, of which Paul Krugman spoke. We've actually made a pretty fair fist of supporting growth in hugely difficult circumstances. The recession in Scotland was not as deep or as long as elsewhere in the United Kingdom. But right now we are promoting recovery with one hand tied behind our backs. We can't adjust tax rate, we can't borrow prudently even for capital investment to invest in infrastructure. And a point of agreement, as governments internationally focus on the necessity for a growth strategy, should surely be that capital investment in key projects and infrastructure and increasing the productive capacity of a country is a fundamental difference to revenue spending and the necessity for bringing revenue budgets into line with reality. That capital spending is of huge importance, whether it be private sector, public sector, in terms of maintaining, and at a time, of course, where many private companies, through lack of confidence, are amassing large quantities of capital. The public sector has a substantial role in leading infrastructure investment. So these positions that we have, the things that we cannot do in Scotland at the present moment, of course, have a direct effect. I mean, they have an effect on the opportunities for our young people, the welfare of our most vulnerable members of our society, and therefore it is of not just irritation but huge frustration that the Scottish Government do not have the ability and power at the present moment to meet these human needs with decisive action. What's the simplest encapsulation of the case for independence? I think the simplest encapsulation is this, that the people best placed to make decisions about Scotland's future are those who choose to live and work in Scotland. Nobody, but nobody, will care more about the welfare and benefit and the common weal of the Scottish people than those who live and work in Scotland. And that belief is at the centre of a civic, inclusive case that we're putting forward for independence. Scottish independence and the cause of independence is not based on where people come from. It's based on where we're going together as a country. Now, as America has done for many generations, including for many, many millions of Scots, we are proud to extend a welcome for those who choose to call Scotland their home. And it follows from the fact that we are very much at ease with the reality that nations are both independent and interdependent. Internationalism is part of our DNA, something that any Californian should understand full well. An independent Scotland would be an active member of the international community, would be a member of the United Nations, the European Union. We would still share a currency union with the remaining members of the United Kingdom. We would cooperate closely with nations from around the world. And of course, we would remain close friends of nations, such as the United States, with which we have such a long-lasting ties of trade, of family, of friendship. The United States will remain our biggest trading partner, our biggest foreign investor, and the biggest tourism market outside of the current United Kingdom. The United Kingdom currently is an incorporating union. And the difficulty of an incorporating union is that one nation, by virtue of size, will always prevail in policy decisions over the others. I think it's an anachronism in the modern age. When the United Nations was founded, it had 51 member countries. Now there are almost 200. As recently as 1990, Europe had 35 countries, now it has 50. Of the 27 countries which currently make up the European Union, 6 of them didn't exist as independent states before 1990. And independence, with the right to participate as an equal on the international stage, appears more and more like Scotland's normal and natural state of being. Now, that's why I believe, as First Minister, that Scotland will choose to be independent in 2014. With greater powers, we could do more to improve the prosperity and well-being of our people. We would re-enter the community of nations on a basis of equality, responsibility and friendship. We would fulfil our duties as a good global citizen. Or as Thomas Jefferson said, we are a people capable of self-government and worthy of it. Or to finally quote Scotland's bard Robert Burns, for all that and all that, it's coming yet, for all that.